Hello and welcome inside the first edition of the Scores Table for the new basketball season. Brian Hench and Danny Reagan, Courtney Delks here with you. I need to put on everybody's banners, but we're back with you for another girls basketball season here, and we're all very excited about it, I think. How you doing, Courtney?
Doing awesome. Excited. We're recording this. It's November 1st, so all of the corn is out around us, and I always knew when the corn and harvest season happened, it was almost basketball season, and it's time. Exhibition games are going on in college. It's time to get the high school girls season kicked off.
Came up a lot quicker, I think, than everybody expected. I know, Danny, we've talked about that a little bit. I mean, I can't believe it's already here.
Yeah, it did. So Halloween has always kind of been the mark for me. And last night, I took my littlest trick or treating, and we're going house to house. And I was just wearing like a hoodie, and it felt like kind of a early fall night, which was a little bit misleading. But I remember last year, I think I went to a game on Halloween. I think I went to a game at like Monroe. I think I went to Eastern Hancock, Monrovia. And so this morning was the first time I actually really looked at the schedule, but it's here. Yeah, teams are scrimmaging and teams are ready to go. And so I think we're ready to start talking some girls basketball. I'm excited about it.
So the format for today's show is we spent some time hammering out. We're going to start with talking about our state champions. Obviously, respect first to the champions. We'll work our way down from 4A down, then loop our way back up, talk about some contenders and mix in some other topics as well. I think the plan this season will probably have close to weekly shows again, bi-weekly. We'll follow the same format with some surprise shows in between, and then obviously going all out for the postseason. So if you haven't already, highly recommend that you subscribe to us on YouTube /@IndyStarHank. Find everything too on Twitter and IndyStar.com as well. And with that, I think we should probably start here with the defending 4A champions, and that's Lawrence Central. I'll start the discussion with this. They're really good.
Yeah, they're really good. They're really good. They're the story this year, aren't they? I mean, doesn't it seem like? I mean, they passed every test that was put in front of them last year. And as the year progressed, when they got into this championship, dare I say, they just looked unbeatable. And they return everyone, don't they? I mean, just everyone. And they're actually returning really good players. Like they're returning like high major Division I recruits, nationally ranked players, kids that have 4 stars, kids that are going to get their 5th star. They added kids like Hyatt. And I think going into the season, I think if you asked me what the biggest story in Indiana girls high school basketball is this year, I think I would tell you how this Lawrence Central run is punctuated. Like, do they win another state championship, run the table, and graduate their time here as one of the best teams in Indiana high school basketball history? Or is somebody going to pull an upset? Because I do think they're just so good. And I just can't. I just last year, I think, teams came close. Like Center Grove came close. But I think that's going to be an interesting thing to follow. And I know the individual pieces have gotten better, and we'll see. So I don't know, Courtney, that's probably the lead story, right, of the season is LC?
Absolutely, I 100% agree. Especially the year they're coming off of, like they have the crown right now. And somebody's got to go take it from them. And the fact that they could have 4 1,000-point scorers this year, like I was a part of a team like that when I played Oak Hill, and that was one of my the most fun years of basketball I had. Like the ball's going to get passed around really well. Like who's going to stop them? That's the question. It is the question. And just the fact that Jayla, could pass Kyle Guy and to become the all-time leading scorer of Lawrence Central, that's legit. My husband just spent some time with Kyle 2 weeks ago out at Virginia, and the head coach there now that replaced Coach Bennett said Kyle Guy built Virginia, and Kyle Guy built Lawrence Central, and Jayla is about ready to make her mark as building up Lawrence Central girls basketball.
And I would add to that too, for those people that are listening to this or to surpass Kyle Guy's name, that's a big deal. Not only was he a high school legend here on the boys side, but he goes on to Virginia, and Courtney mentioned Coach Bennett, and we wish him the best in his retirement. but won a national championship for the University of Virginia also. And so like he went on and has given back to the community in like implementing dizzy runs in Indianapolis through, Mojo, Finch Creek and things like that. But yeah, that's a big, like Jayla Lampley, and to collide with Kyle Guy's name in that community is a very big deal.
What fascinates me with LC, and obviously they're good, and I think they're the favorites, is just how big is that gap between them and the field? Like, it's hard to say, because I mean, and Janon Lampley was pretty open about this when we were talking preseason stuff too, is like, they're not a super deep team. And that's kind of like, it's going to be a question of how do they build it up. And honestly, I think the parity, just even within their own sectional, is crazy. Like Lawrence North is going to be in there, and we'll talk about them in a bit, but then you get further down, Center Grove is going to be back again. Gibson Southern is a team that I'm high on out of the South. Like it's such a wide open year where you have a favorite, but it feels like the pack is nipping at their heels, and it's going to set up for a really fun year. And that's not even addressing the teams that could come out of the North and cause them some problems. And credit too for Lawrence Central. I mean, they're going to play a championship worthy schedule for the most part. They'll challenge themselves against a lot of good teams out of state. They play South Bend, Washington, which is the game that I'd like to think I talked into fruition at the end of last year. That should be insane. They get to their South Bend, Washington is going to be coming down here for a game, which will be fantastic. So yeah, I'm really excited to see them in action, and they're just a fun team to watch with just all the pieces. And be remiss too if we didn't mention, a kid like Mariah Kendra Garrett, who is kind of an unsung hero for that group, just with what she brings defensively, and she hit some big shots that got them rolling in that championship game and during the sectional run. And then too, Anaya McKenzie. I remember talking to coaches last year around the state championship game, and they kind of talked about how on that team with so many stars, Anaya McKenzie was kind of the one who scared them so much because she's so athletic and she's so big and strong. Like just seeing that kid work onto the basket. I mean, she's a battering down there. And I think her and then Lola too, Lola Lampley. I think this is going to be the year for them to really take that jump, similar to what we saw Carson Norman, Chloe Spreen from their sophomore to junior years. And, Reagan Wilson did the same thing, kids like that. So I'm really excited for them, really high in their potential. But again, just curious to see how big of a gap there is between them and the field.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lola and Naya, Layla, all of those kids. I also mentioned that they're adding a kid into a role this year. I think they expect a lot from the Hyatt kid, and for them to add a contributing player and some depth, I think could be a very interesting dynamic. So I think the thing about Hyatt, I was at the Charlie Hughes event at Hamilton Southeastern. I was watching them play. Who was I watching them play? Courtney. I was watching them play Warsaw, and the Hyatt kid was Coach Lampley was playing her and getting her experience, and I'm sure the rest of the studs were pretty limited, and so they were really running some things through highlight. But she seems to like really identify with who they are. Like they don't just get teams to commit fouls, like they draw fouls. Like they are relentless with the way they attack. In it's partly their identity, and I think she really fits into that. My question for you, Courtney, and I'm surely some of your Oak Hill Sweetser teams, kind of fell into that. But do you get? I mean, it sounds silly. Do you get tired of winning? Like, does that become boring?
No, I have to pause because it's like being 32 now, I know that through losses that you learn more and you're motivated more from a loss. But winning does not get boring, because I think if you create the environment that your practices are so dang hard and they're harder than the games, then the game is like the icing on the cake. It's like during the week when you're practicing, if you're playing against, you have, guys coming in and you just feel like you're getting beat up all the time. Then to go out and to just like ball out and to win, it doesn't get boring. So if you are in a situation where, as long as you are continuing to grow as an individual, continuing to grow as a coach, it doesn't get boring, because there's always so much more to learn and to grow. And even when you're at that level, like when you win, you're still picking out the things of like, we got to get better here. So you can't become complacent. I would say teams that become complacent just think that they got it, like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. That's when you got to be careful because somebody's going to knock you off.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, though. Like, so complacency, I think, is a very natural thing. I mean, they're young women on that basketball team. I think the thing with Lawrence Central is going to come down to, can they flip the switch? I mean, I just don't know. I mean, there's probably only 5 teams on their schedule that can give them a game anyways. Okay. So what happens to the other 20 teams, right? And so do they create bad habits? Do they get comfortable? And when they do play one of the 5 teams that can get them, can they flip the switch? And I have seen it in my basketball experience where you just have teams that are just like, listen, we will be one version of us against these teams, but we will be the best version of ourselves against these teams when we have to. And quite honestly, that's what we saw with Lawrence Central last year. I think we saw, I mean, I don't know, agree or disagree. We saw the best version of Lawrence Central last year in the second half of the state championship. I mean, that was like the best version of them. And I say the second half, I mean, it could also be the second quarter. I mean, when they flipped to Red 2 or Red H or whatever it was that we joked about last year, I mean, it was really something to see them defend. I mean, they were shot makers. Layla Abdurkeeb and Jayla Lampley were just significant shot makers. And Nia McKenzie and Lola Lampley were the best versions of themselves. Even Coach Lampley seemed to be pulling the right strings at the right time. And it'll be interesting to see, like, are they going to get better? Like, if that was the best version of themselves and no one touched them last year, with the exception of the first half pre-Lily Bischoff ankle, I guess, is the best version of themselves something that we haven't seen yet? And if the answer to that question is yes, that's going to be really, really scary and really interesting to watch throughout the season.
We're going to try and get Courtney back here. She's dealing with some internet issues. I apologize for dipping out too. I had to relocate to get better internet for everybody, and it backfired, obviously. But yeah, no, I'm interested to see Lawrence Central too. And I mean, but again, we'll talk about them more in a bit when we get to some of the contenders in 4A towards the end of the show. But Danny, let's move down to 3A.
Before we real quickly,
Sure.
like Jayla Lampley, I mean, I think it's worth noting that she has made her college selection and going to Mississippi State too. So, you know, this is going to be an interesting and different campaign, I think, for her. And I think it also brings up the questions now, what's Lola going to do? What's Lola going to do collegiately? Will she follow Jayla? You know, Sam Purcell is somebody that's recruited Indiana in the Midwest for a very long time. He's the head coach at Mississippi State, was actually the associate head coach down at Louisville very recently under Jeff Walls. And obviously Louisville, being right on the other side of the river from Indiana, has recruited traditionally Indiana very heavily. But, you know, without being in that inner circle, there was probably some connection there with Sam. Sam's a great coach, did all of his homework and knows what he's getting in Jayla. But now Jayla can focus on the repeat. She can focus on Miss Basketball. She can focus on her sister's recruitment and things like that. And I'm sure she's going to break records. I'm sure, you know, it's going to be seemingly every week. She'll become the all-time leader in steals and the all-time scoring leader, and she'll hit her, you know, whatever. You know, all those different milestones along the way. But anyways, if you will move on, but congratulations to Jayla Lampley.
Absolutely. And two, I mean, just circling back, I mean, Courtney mentioned it, but challenging Kyle Guy's scoring record at LC is unbelievable. And just some of the things that she's done and what they've done with that program too is really cool. And just getting it turned around. Gibson Southern is going to be in 4A this year, but they are the defending 3A champs. Gabby Spink is their front runner. I think that she too could maybe enter that Miss Basketball conversation with just the run of success that they've had over the past couple of years. Paige Schnaus, I remember she came on really strong last year at the end, really shined during the state tournament, especially in their run to that championship game. But there are some pieces to fill around them. Danny, what do you make of Gibson Southern as they look to replace kids like Chloe Graham and Malone and some of those other pieces that they have, some of the other seniors that they have as they move up to 4A?
Yeah, Gabby Spink is one of the 10 best 25s in the state. She's so good. And she hit – I mean, it was her one shining moment, right? I mean, there's winning the state championship, and then there's winning the state championship because you hit the big three down the stretch that put you up 2 possessions. I mean, it was cold too. Like, it was deep. It wasn't one of those like, oh, wide open, she has to shoot it kind of things. She caught the ball, was in rhythm. She trusted her process. She trusted her preparation, and she knocked it down on the biggest stage. to return a kid like that is as the defending champ, I mean, is almost super unfair. And then that's in 25. In 27, Paige Schnaus is one of the 10 best players in that class in 27. I mean, she's already brought in at the year 2027 multiple Division I offers. She's a really good player, and both of those kids were super instrumental in the state championship game last year. They attacked Norwell's odd front zone from the corners last year. And a lot of times with these odd front zones, you have to get behind it. You have to use the corners. And it's something that teams are afraid to do because you can flood the zone to one way. You can get yourself in trouble if you don't have confidence or the strength to throw skip passes. That's a real thing. But using the corner and getting behind odd front zones gives you it really drops the level of the zone. It moves defenders around and it creates indecision with who has who. One of the biggest things in that Norwell game last year was when they used the corner, in the second half, they made a really nice adjustment in diving Paige Schnaus to the block. And that changed everything. So having said all of that, Gabby Spink hit the biggest shot. The biggest schematic adjustment was made through getting Paige Schnaus touches on the block against odd front zone, and they returned that. And so I feel like Gibson Southern, I don't think all due respect to the kids that they graduate and have to replace, I don't know that you're going to see much of a fall off. I think they're really, really good.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, that South, man, is going to be really good. And Gibson Southern, I mean, depending, again, the randomness of it all is kind of stupid, but if they get a fortuitous draw, they could avoid Lawrence Central until the semi-state championship game, or things like that. Like, it could set up really well for them where the Indy-area teams pick them off. And there is a world where, for the first time in a while, you don't have any Indy-area teams, and it's because of a team like Gibson Southern moving up from 3A. Like, the success factor, I'm kind of hot and cold on it, and I'd love for us to talk about that in a different show, but they feel like a team where the move up comes at a pretty good time, where you still have your best player, you have an up-and-coming sophomore, and you have good young pieces with some varsity experience to fill in around them. And then Danny, like you broke down, I mean, Kyle Brasher is just such a good coach, and that's going to help elevate them too. So it'll be exciting. And then credit to them as well with the scheduling. You play Chatard, you come up here and you play Silver Creek at the Sneakers for Santa. You're going to play Fishers. You're going to play Roncalli. So they're getting up here on some Indy-area teams. And Kyle Soakland actually talked with Gabby Spink and Paige Schnaus about that and how they prepare for playing at their new level. And that was one of the things they mentioned, was just beefing up the schedule a little bit, getting up here, seeing some different styles of play, bigger kids that match up well with Schnaus, kids with the athleticism to hold on to Spink while also matching up with Schnaus in the post, So things like that make it interesting. So they're going about it the right way. And I think that it all comes together and you have another contender here as they move up.
I think there's one thing about Gibson Southern, and Courtney, you probably saw it a lot when you played, but Gabby's going to get loaded up on this year. I would assume, without knowing their roster, and we can change this narrative as we start to see them more in the new in this year's rendition of who Gibson Southern is. But I think Gabby's going to have to play some point this year. I think Kyle's going to have to put the ball in her hands, is going to have her kind of do some things in addition to being a catch and release 3-point shooter. I mean, the play that I had referenced earlier in the state championship was a catch and release 3. So Gabby's ability to have to kind of move to point guard and create opportunities for some of their other pieces, I think, is going to be critical. Courtney, what's Gabby have to really kind of do if she's going to see a face guard defender and all 4 players like standing on helpline for her and everything is congested? Like, what's her approach? Does it change at all? Or
I would say, I agree with you. You have to have the ball in her hands as much as possible, because the ball's out of her hands. I mean, I can remember many times in Mackey Arena getting face guarded and like going up to Coach V and saying like, what should I do? She's like, just stand in the corner. Like, your teammates have got to go score. Like, your best job is bring the other defender and let them go 4-on-4. And somebody's gonna have to set up. Or she'll say, I remember her telling me like, the best thing's gonna be like on the bench. And we'll see what the team can do. Like, there's certain situations, but as a player, you don't want to hear that. But if she can get tough just to have the ball in her hands, or to understand like the game of basketball is a team sport, so like there's gonna be times you have to rely on your teammates. And I think the WNBA finals is great, where Sabrina and Stewie go 5 of 34 in the championship game. If you would have told me that and told me that Liberty won the game, I would have told you you're crazy. But that is a proven fact. There has to be other people to step up. And so she just has to be a leader and like tell her teammates. They need to be putting the work in. And she's just gonna be super tough and take it as a compliment. Like you're getting defended like that because you're super good.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. You're going to move us down now to Fort Wayne Bishop Luers in 2A. Bit of a turnover season as we were finding out doing our research on them. Bishop Luers, they graduated a number of pieces from their team, and then they also lost a transfer as well. It looks like with Addie Waring moving over to Fort Wayne Northrop. So that's a big loss for Bishop Luers. Addie Shank and Annika Davis were their two big graduations, but they do return Reese Rodenhamel, who averaged around 7 points, 4 rebounds a game last year, plus an assist and a steal. So the cupboard's not completely bare, but it is setting up for a bit of a rebuild year for Fort Wayne Bishop Luers as they look to try and defend their state title as well in Class 2A or from Class 2A. I'll move us down again to Lanesville in Class A. Obviously, the big question, at least for me coming into the year, was where would Hadley Crozier be? And following her rehab and staying in touch with her over the summer, the rehab has been going brilliantly. The kid's a freak of nature, frankly. She's out there running miles like a month or so afterwards. Like she gets right back on it, and she was officially cleared for practice and full contact on Halloween on Thursday. So she's back practicing. It sounds like if things go well and continue progressing, she'll be back and available for limited minutes starting at the beginning of the year. So that's huge news for Lanesville, which does graduate a lot, but they return her, Shelby Allen, and Hilton Brumley, who's kind of been their big three, their nucleus over the years in these 2 Class A state championships. And as they move up to 2A, I'm not doubting the Eagles' propensity to compete in the new class.
Yeah, Hadley Crozier. I don't know that I've had a conversation with Hadley Crozier that's lasted more than 4 words. But when she came out of the tunnel last year in the state championship game on crutches and hugged all of the teammates, it was one of the maybe overstating here, but iconic images of the season last year. And so to hear her ACL recovery has gone well and that she's going to play basketball for Lanesville this year, I think is a win for all of us, and especially a win for Lanesville and that family and Hadley herself. So good for her. But that was like a mind-numbing thing, man. There was a lot of people at that game. Lanesville travels really well. And I remember where I was sitting behind you, Hank. You were obviously on the floor, kind of right in front of the Lanesville section, and I was in.
You were up behind him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was up behind him. And so in between us was Lanesville, and it was so quiet, Hank, that you and I probably could have had a shouting conversation across the gym. It was that quiet. And that, of course, is just the human nature of it also, but it also speaks to just her importance to that basketball team. We talked at length last year about how she set the defensive tempo, the defensive rules, and what she did defensively. This was last year the best defensive basketball team in relative to their class in the state. Okay. Now, all due respect to Lawrence Central, because it was literally impossible to score or see the basket for Lawrence Central. But no one scored on Lanesville, like all year. And it had a lot to do with Hadley Crozier. So I think as long as she's in the lineup, they're going to be tough regardless of class.
Yeah. And then, Hilton Brumley, too, she got some really valuable experience in that game running point. So that's going to help ease the transition now as Lanesville eases Hadley back into the lineup. And two, Danny, you can't overstate just how important she is defensively to that team too. We talked about going to the game last year. She's just so good defensively and just so important to that team. And it really did. That moment spoke to just her importance to the community as well.
Well, you can bookmark this, but if we get the moment at Gainsbridge to see her have a great game and I don't know, maybe win an award afterwards or something like that. Or I think it's going to be, to see her get the blue lanyard last year being hurt on crutches and seeing her get a blue lanyard this year, I think we'll provide some nice symmetry to the Hadley Crozier story before we say goodbye to her for Indiana high school basketball.
I'm curious too to see how she fits into the Miss Basketball discussion, similar to an Amber Treader at Forest Park a couple of years ago. I think she's probably in that finals conversation. We'll see. I think another state championship really vaults her into that contender candidate conversation, but I certainly think that she belongs like a vote getter and a finalist type of kid for just her body of work. And then coming back this year, I mean, gosh, if they go on a deep run, even make it out of sectional into semi-state, I don't think there's any question, but it'll be fascinating to see how that unfolds. One other note too on Lanesville before we move on, Shelby Allen is going to get a full season healthy too. Like she was a big addition to them midway through last year. She had the knee injury, and what's funny about that is I think she tore it in like an AAU game and then decided to try and walk it off, play through it, and was jogging in the hallways, which kind of made it a little bit worse and delayed her recovery. But she's a kid. We're going to have a feature on her later this year because she also does rodeo. She was not a big basketball person, didn't really like it. I think Hadley Crozier's mom and maybe Hilton's mom got her into it and kind of got them going. Like those three have grown up together and got into it, started to love it, started to dig it. And as she got taller and bigger, I mean, she's really flourished, and she's just so important to that team last year. And the size that she presents, even at the Class 2A level, is going to be such a game changer for Lanesville. And it just feels like just kind of a matter of how do the pieces around them come together. But I mean, Shelby Allen is my pick to really raise her stock this year, I think.
Well, interestingly, as we were introducing ourselves really first to Lanesville and the pieces on that team, and I was watching film last year, so just to kind of shed light on this, a lot of times what we'll do is, maybe we'll ask around, and sometimes we'll do internet research and things like that, get some statistics and all of that. Statistically, Shelby Allen last year wasn't a huge piece of the first half of the year due to the injury, but you didn't know that just looking at a statistical spreadsheet. But then I remember watching them for the first time on film, and I can't remember who it was against, but I remember saying to myself, like, this kid's really, really impactful with what they do. I mean, she clogs up the middle, sometimes in those smaller schools too. And I don't want to say it's just specific to the smaller schools, but let's call it what it is. A lot of the tall athletes on the girls' side are on the volleyball courts. Okay. And I'll just say that. I mean, maybe that's another conversation for another day. But for a team like Lanesville to have kids like Brumley and Crozier and things like that, but to also have like a true post presence is really something that is unique. And I think they're obviously going to be a tough out, like I said, regardless of class. But Shelby Allen was a kid who just jumped off the film last year with how tough she was to guard, particularly within those smaller classes. And it's just unique. Not a lot of kids have them. It's one of the reasons why we liked Luers last year in 2A was because not only did they have Addie Shank, who's graduated, but they also had Miley Waring. They had two kids at that class who designate as post players, if you will, and because of that, they were virtually unbeatable in the postseason run. Who's
the best post you played with, Court, in high school?
That I played with or played against?
Well, let's go with and against. Let's go with first, though.
It's got to be Pick, right?
Oh yeah, Pickering. Classmate. She was 6'5". She was getting recruited for basketball and volleyball. Had a full ride to play volleyball at Purdue. I mean, she was an athlete, and she could get up and down the floor and run. She was a stud basketball player.
What about against?
Against? Probably we played against Heritage Christian, obviously. And, I mean, Kelly Ferris played down in the post area, even though she was really, truly like a wing player. But she played down there, and she was just super strong, smart, one of the highest basketball IQ players I've ever been around. So she was really, really good. And we also played against Ben Davis. So the Goss sisters, De'Ara Goss down low was the absolute – I mean, you didn't want to be down there.
Yeah. So was that Ben Davis? Was that a Hall of Fame Classic matchup, or did you guys just get him on the schedule?
Yeah, that was a Hall of Fame, the championship game.
Nice.
Yeah, we got 2 10-second calls in the first 30 seconds. I was like, yeah, this is going to be a long game.
Something new. They'd stepped into something wholly unique. Oh my goodness.
That's when his coaches were like, you almost celebrate, Courtney, the dead ball change of possession. Like, take a 5-second call, take a 10-second timeline violation.
Yeah.
Just don't turn the ball over live. And I mean, that's just those are the games where as coaches and players, we're all just like, no, forget it. Like, we're celebrating that. This is not going to go well. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, their backcourt was Alex Bentley, Dee Williams, and Bria Goss.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Try getting past that. I mean, it was, and they put they were 55 pressing the whole time. Like, they were legit. They were the number one team in the nation.
Did they double you or just stick one girl and have her follow you the entire game?
I can't even remember. They
didn't even have to.
I tried to
Dee Williams was two. Dee Williams was two players.
Yes.
She'd go like this, and you couldn't see anything.
Mm-hmm. Facts.
Arm span taller than Courtney.
I mean, but they had Division I kids like coming off the bench. Like, I think, what's her name? Like Jordan Huber, right? Remember her,
yep.
Courtney? Like, that kid could make
Ball
shots.
State.
And yeah, she went to Ball State. Like, Division I recruit, she's coming off the bench, and she was a 3-and-D player for him that, for anybody else would have been, an Indiana All-Star.
It's crazy, too. It's one thing that I admire about like HSC volleyball, just the ability to keep everybody together on those teams, too. And obviously, Courtney, we were discussing before the show, how transfers weren't as prevalent then. But even in present context, it's amazing to think about with kids sticking around the way that they are. Shifting with Lanesville moving up to 2A, obviously that's going to create a bit of it's going to open things up a lot more, in Class A. I think the first team that you need to talk about in that sense is Borden, which has been the victim in sectional of Lanesville the past couple years at least. And then another team, Marquette Catholic, which is on the wrong side. Their comeback came up just short in last year's state championship game. Let's start with Borden because I think they're maybe the biggest threat to win a state championship this year. It feels like, kind of like the roads opened up and opportunity for them to finally get that championship. And they've got a really talented core there with Ava Wheeler, Riley Rarick, AJ Mallett, and Emma Hart all going into their junior season. So, I mean, you won 20 games last year with the sophomore core. I'm pretty excited to see what they can do with all those kids a year older and a year stronger.
Yeah, I think last year the narrative on Borden was that they had 2 Division I players in a Class A school at Borden. They're back. I mean, Wheeler and Rarick are back, and they both have some length, and they're both stronger, and they're both better basketball players. And so I think Borden has to be approaching this year, whereas last year they might have approached to say, hey, listen, when are we going to run into Lanesville? When are we going to run into Lanesville? And can we get by them when we do? I remember watching those games on film last year, but this year I think they are probably the alpha in the class, right? I mean, you don't have 2 Division I players at the Class A level in Indiana without being the favorite. So I think it'll be interesting to see if anything changes on the floor, because things are going to change in, between their ears. I think it is going to be different approaching the state tournament as this, we're supposed to win this, as opposed to we're supposed to beat everybody until we get to Lanesville, and we'll see what happens when we play Lanesville. It's a very different thing, and sometimes it can mess with basketball players' minds and things like that. So, but yeah, Rarick and Wheeler are back. Borden will be a school that we talk about a lot throughout the season. People will probably get tired of it, but we really need to. I mean, they really need to be the people that, or the probably needs to be the school that is probably on top right now, at least south of Indianapolis.
Interesting run of the schedule too there in December. They go at Jennings County, at Lanesville. That's a game that we'll probably be at the Indy Star, at Providence on the 14th. And then they host Jeffersonville from 4A before the Scottsburg tournament after Christmas. So they're going to be tested right there in the middle. We'll kind of get a sense of where this team stands, but credit to them for building up the schedule like they did. Another Class A contender, Marquette Catholic. They made it. It felt like last year in the moment that it was a team that kind of made the state championship game. I mean, like they were a year ahead of schedule. They were there a year before they were supposed to be. And now, I mean, they have everybody back with Lanaya Davis, who was only a sophomore last year and already has 1,000 points. And then Marissa Pleasant, who's going to be a sophomore this year. So you have a good junior sophomore tandem there. And you have Katie Clignan, their coach we had on the show last year, who she just knows how to win. She's led that team to 3 finals appearances in 8 seasons, which is no small feat at any level, certainly not at the Class A level, which always seems to kind of be a grab bag in terms of who comes out of there. So that's another team. Like if I had to pick, that might be the state championship matchup right there is Marquette Catholic and Borden.
Yeah, about 4 months ago at the Charlie Hughes event in June, Marquette Catholic played Borden in an auxiliary gym. The game next to them at the same time was Lawrence Central versus Warsaw.
That's right.
And I remember standing in between them watching it. And if you watched Katie during that game, she just looks very cool, very under control. She wasn't coaching it because they felt like they needed to win it. The reason why I share that observation with you is because this is a team who seems to be preparing for a one-game season. They're really good. Katie's been there several times with 2 different cores of players now. She knows how to get those kids back, and to have Pleasant, who hit the big shot in the postseason run last year. I think it was a big 3 that gave them a 1-point victory, like a buzzer beater, one shining moment kind of thing. But Lanai Davis is a stud, man. She's an absolute stud. But Katie in that game, through her trips, in between her trips to Europe, just seemed very cool. But the irony, I'd love to be able to go back and like watch that game. I think on film, I doubt I could find a Charlie Hughes event game now between 2, Class A teams. But that would be an interesting one to kind of go back if we do get that matchup downtown in Indy.
Absolutely. Court, I'm curious for you. We've been talking about some kids who moving from their breakout sophomore years to their junior seasons. How big of a jump is it? And what I guess changes for kids between their sophomore and junior seasons? Because it does seem like that's the time when everybody kind of really levels up their game. Even if they're good their first 2 years, it's like the junior season. It seems like for the most part, maybe it's just anecdotal, but that seems to be the year when everything really kind of comes together and takes off. Why?
Transformation takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to, I always say with my clients, like you have to go touch your dreams sometime and know what it takes to get back there and come at it in a different mindset that you don't. I think really, I guess I would explain like your freshman and sophomore year, you're kind of like out, like you got to prove something. And like sometimes players just, they want it so bad. And I think when you transition into your junior, senior year, like you've been there, you've proven it, and people know that you're good. And so there's like this jump where like you don't need it so bad and you just play the game of basketball. And there's not like this added pressure that you're putting on yourself. And I think that jump from sophomore to junior year is where you see that transformation happen, where people don't just need it so bad. They just go play and they trust their preparation. And it's just it takes time to mature. Like you got to go through, you can't skip steps.
Absolutely. Some other teams from Class A to keep an eye on there. North Central Farmersburg, I forgot. They return 3 of their top 4 leading scorers, so they're going to have a really good core to build around, including the Davidson kid who averaged almost 18 a game plus 6 assists. They're really good. So they could be a force out of the South. Orleans, they were upset in the sectional, but they averaged nearly 49 points a game, shot 38% as a team. Same thing where they have a good nucleus returning. And then Morgan Township as well. They have a leading scorer to replace, but they have some seniors coming in who are ready to take over the mantle for them. Shifting up to Class 2A, these classes, this is where things start to get a little weird because of realignment and stuff. I think, Danny, obviously the conversation probably starts at the Knox schools, North and South Knox. North has Lexi Primus, Alex McKinley, Brenna Collins, Brooklyn Sturgeon as well, who was averaging over 3 assists a game. South Knox last year, their only losses were to North Knox, and they have the majority of their roster back too with Ella Bobe, who was the 3rd player in program history to clear 1,000 points. So I think any analysis of 2A probably begins with those 2 teams.
Yeah, I think North Knox and South Knox, neither of them being sectional champions last year, doesn't really encapsulate what their seasons were like last year. I mean, they were world beaters down there. They got everybody. I mean, I think last year, just talking specifically about North Knox, their only loss in the regular season was a 1-point loss on the road at 4A perennial power Bedford North Lawrence. I think they lost 51-50. Interestingly, I think if you look at North Knox and just looking at the game, and I talked to a couple of people down there that maybe shared the same thing, but there's something, I think they only failed to score 40 points twice. And those were both the games that North Knox lost last year. And they were both against Linton. Like they had everybody. I mean, maybe there was something about the way Jared Remmel's Linton Stockton teams guarded North Knox last year that was like kryptonite for them. So North Knox, yeah, of course, Lexi Primus, who we had on the show and talked a little bit about this, but they have super high expectations. She also just committed to, where did she come? She committed to Lipscomb in Nashville, Division I school. So Lexi doesn't have anything to worry about in regards to her college recruitment now. Courtney, you might actually remember this. Like, one of the coaches, the assistant coaches down there is Sydney Shelton, who's actually, I think, Julie Shelton's niece, and she was a heck of a player at Mount Vernon Fortville, and went on to, I think verbally committed to Kentucky at one point in time. Did a year at Kentucky, played at Butler, finished her career at Lipscomb, and now she's coaching and pulling kids out of Indiana down to Nashville. So yeah, we'll watch North Knox. They beefed up their schedule this year. So you're going to see them play Center Grove. I think they're in a holiday tournament with Brownsburg where the winners play the winners and the losers play the losers. So they could play the Fighting Sables out of Brownsburg. I wrote some notes here. Rensselaer Central, Jeffersonville, Bedford North Lawrence. I mean, so they're going to be tested. I don't know that they're going to be able to go through unscathed, but if they do, it's going to be against a tougher schedule, at least according to the computers.
Yep. You mentioned Rensselaer Central. They're a new 2A team, and they have everybody back almost too, with Taylor Von Meter and Camry Rowland being the centerpieces there. And then also bring back Carly Drone, who averaged around 10 points a game. So they have a really good scoring nucleus there. And that served them well at the 3A level, where they had a lot of success. They just were in a really brutal sectional there at Rensselaer Central. So they seem like they could be a factor. Brownstown Central, which was the 2A runner-up last year, they're another one that could make some noise this year with Harley Toppy, Sophie Wishmeyer, Jenna Klosterman, Mallory Klosterman, and Kinsey Dean, all among their notable returners down there in Brownstown Central. Anybody?
Yeah, I think the computers like South Knox in that class. I think they're the highest preseason Sagarin team that's out there. You mentioned Ella Bobe, but they also have the Hill sisters, Bren Hill and Kendall Hill. Both of them project to be collegiate basketball players. Kids like Grace Detweiler was shot 50% from the field. They expect big things from her. She got into double figures and scoring, and that provides a lot of balance for them. So you can't load up on Ella or the Hill sisters. But South Knox, I think, is probably, I don't want to anoint them the favorite right now, draw a big target on their back and all of that. But Hank, you had mentioned earlier, just real casually, their only losses came to North Knox last year. So I'm sure that there's a gigantic chip on their shoulder, especially returning who they return.
Courtney has to run here to get to another engagement. But Courtney, any final thoughts on the start of the season, life in general, anything like that before we let you go?
Let me tell you what the big engagement is. A preschool fall party. So lots of caramel apples and fun stuff. No, I'm just really excited. I think we're in for an exciting year of girls basketball. There's so much talent around the state and a lot of upperclassmen to watch. So to those of you listening that have young daughters, like, get your daughters out in the stands and to go watch some really exciting players all around the state so that they can start touching their dreams. And speaking of dreams, I think you guys wanted me to mention the dream of mine from the time I was a 5-year-old little girl of being a professional basketball player. When I was 22 years old, I didn't know that the last game in Mackey, I didn't feel that the last game in Mackey against Oklahoma State was my last basketball game. I've never felt that. And so I'm 32, and you talk about the jump from a sophomore year to a junior year. So we're talking about a jump from a 22-year-old to a 32-year-old who has been married almost 10 years, has 2 kids, has parenting a 7 and a 5-year-old. Like, I'm getting back into basketball and chasing a dream right now of playing professional basketball. And the journey is a destination. I've been on this journey for 4 months, so I'll be updating you guys along the way. If you want to follow along, every Friday we put out a podcast on our platform. It's Compete Mentality Podcast. where we dive in deeper into the journey. So if you want your daughters to listen, and we talk a lot about mindset in there. So it's just a fun time and just sharing that with the world.
So Courtney, we'll be following, Courtney.
Yeah, one more time, Courtney. Tell people where they can find all that.
Yep, it's the Sorry, got tongue tied. It is the Compete Mentality podcast. You can find that on Apple Podcasts. It's out on all platforms, Spotify, I believe. So you can follow along there on our Instagram at Compete Training Academy. You can follow along. We post some highlight videos and different things on there as well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We'll talk to you again soon, Courtney. Best of luck with everything and have fun doing the Halloween thing today.
Let's go. Fired up. Let's go get these kids fired up. Time to go compete. See you guys.
Phenomenal. See you, Court. All right, Danny. We need some local teams too to touch upon. I think we'd be remiss if we just kept this out of area. I mean, I'll brief
a lot out of area, haven't we?
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many good ones in 2A around the Indy-area too. I think the one that I'm most excited about is Sheridan, where they have everybody back. Kinsey Garner has just been phenomenal in her career. She had the semi-state run last year, puts up crazy numbers, just a tremendous player there. She's headed to Ferris State, 21 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 4.2 steals as a junior, which is just as fun to type out as it is to say. And then Cecilia Timmy, Nova Cross, Shelby Eaton, and then a really good crop of sophomores coming in. So they look like they're going to be a team to watch again this year. LaPel is stuck in that same sectional because we're not allowed to have nice things. LaPel obviously brings back Lanaya Wills. There's going to be a little bit of rebuilding around them, it feels like, but Newbie's back to coach. He'd stepped down there briefly, but the change of circumstances, he's back, which is great. Taylor Mraz, Sophie Goodwin bring some additional varsity experience for the Bulldogs. Curious to see where they go. And then same thing too with Eastern Hancock, which graduated such a massive senior class, but similar to LaPel, they have one of the area and the state's best players in Kenzie Cook. So fascinated to see them. Heritage Christian brings back a lot, and they have a challenging sectional as well with Eastern Hancock, Trenton Central. We'll talk about here in a second. Jocelyn Marshall, Casey Frost are both really good there. Jessica Stoltz is not being thrown into the head coaching job days before the season, so that's undoubtedly going to help as well. And then Triton Central, they're not very big, but again, a really good player, Mary Rose Felling, a really talented point guard, and Quinn King, who shined as a freshman with 6 assists per game and 7 returning starters there for the Triton Center Tigers. So I've given the airplane view. I will let you pick which schools we deep dive on from the Indy area.
I think Eastern Hancock and Kenzie Cook is going to be interesting. She became a household name early last year with her coming in very early, but her role is so drastically different this year because of the graduation. You talked about the graduation, and Kenzie's going to be challenged now with, yes, you're extraordinarily talented, but do you have the ability to elevate the play and the production of everybody else on your basketball team? If you could map out a high school career for a kid like Kenzie Cook, the freshman year would look a lot like what we saw last year from Kenzie. You get to play not behind, but you get to play along with seniors who had been there. You play for a super established coach who isn't going to rush you into things. But now as we turn the page to this year, the help is, I don't want to say it's gone, but it's different. And so I think she will face what we talked about with Gabby Spink. I mean, how is she gonna deal with the box and ones? How is she gonna deal with the triangle and twos? How is she gonna deal with the entire basketball team standing on help line? I think shot selection and shot execution, I think, will be big things for her. But Eastern Hancock, I think, is going to be interesting with Kenzie's probably changed role.
And it'll be they got some newcomers coming into. They have a senior center coming in, Lainey Parker, which will be big. Yep. Addie Trackwell, I'm familiar with her from softball season. She's just a good all-around athlete, brings some size, and I'm sure she'll bring some physicality too. Like, that's one of those kids who comes across kind of seems like one of the freak of nature types, which is good for them. And then a sophomore guard in Bella Sotelo. So you're right. It's going to be interesting to see how the help develops, but over the course of the season, who knows what happens. It's unfortunate they're in such a tough sectional with Heritage Christian and Trenton Central.
Yeah, and I would also, I'd be remiss if I didn't double back to Newbie and Lanaya Wills and LaPel. I think a lot of times you start to define the boundaries of the Miss Basketball conversation their junior year. And we'll have an opportunity to unpack all of that. But is it a career award? Is it a senior year award? How much do you value winning? How much do you value their particular role on things? There's all different things that you could argue. But Lania Wills, her Miss Basketball campaign starts this junior season for her. And so, and I know that's probably going to be a goal for her. And I know she's worked endlessly on her game and in being able to do things, but having Newbie back and having some continuity, I think she's probably in for a monster season. And if it ends the way that Lapel wants it to end, what do we say about Lania Wills and, like I said, the boundaries of the Miss Basketball 2026 arguments, because she can inject herself right into the center of that mix with a good season.
She's already got the state finals appearance as a freshman, led them to a runner-up finish, got to, I think, semi-state last year, and then this year she'll be the person. She'll be the centerpiece with graduation. Obviously, there's a little bit more experience around her than what Eastern Hancock has, but it's going to be a lot of new players settling into new roles. And I mean, the sectional will likely run through Sheridan again, which brings everybody back and has their own kind of that fringe Miss Basketball, candidate kind of in that finals conversation, similar to a Hadley Crozier with Kenzie Gardner, which again brings in it. I think that her candidacy depends on how you look at it, career achievements versus junior, senior, all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, if Lapel is to win that sectional, I have to go through Sheridan. I mean, that really bolsters a kid's case.
Yeah, it sure does.
Have to go through. Anything else there on 2A before we move on up to 3A?
No, let's go to 3.
All right. Where should we start with 3A? I'll let you take the ship on this one and decide who we start talking about in 3A.
Well, I think the story in 3A is probably one of the classes that is most affected by realignment. And so I think that's the logical place to start. And I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I know Jennings County, which was a 4-year 4A power, the last 4 years with Julian Woodard, Columbia City. So now we're 51 minutes in for the people that thought we talked about Columbia City too much, but here's the first mention of Columbia City with Addie Baxter. Now they are in 3A. Silver Creek is in 3A. Washington is in 3A. I mean, there's some really, really good basketball teams that would otherwise get beat in 4A now, that we're going to see them potentially in deep postseason runs and trying to punctuate their seasons with state championships. So do you have one out of those schools that you think that can separate early between a Silver Creek, a Washington, Columbia City, Jennings County? Do you have a school?
It's got to be Silver Creek or Washington, right? Like, I feel like of the teams moving down from the ones that you listed, and just to be clear, some of the main ones are Columbia City, Crispus Attucks, Evansville Central, Jennings County, Roncalli, Silver Creek. Silver Creek and Washington, which is a carryover in 3A, I feel like the two that are most built to contend right away. Washington, I'll take them out because that's a different question. I'm learning this on the fly. Silver Creek feels the most built for early success of the teams that moved down, just based on who they're returning with Emma Shane, Brooklyn Wren, the pieces that they have there coming down to 3A, back to 3A where they belong, if not for success factor and the run that they had with the back-to-back trips to Gamebridge. Columbia City, Jennings County both fall in the same basket of let's see how the pieces around their stars, Addie Baxter, Molly Ernstis, progress and develop. Crispus Attucks is a wild card. They obviously have Cameron Banks. They have like a totally redone roster, and they got some real potential there. Just a really, really tough schedule or sectional. Evansville Central, we haven't touched on them yet. Maddie Shirley leads them. She's an area standout that folks need to know about. And then obviously Roncalli too, with Elliot Leffler and a variety of multi-sport athletes, just a really well-balanced, well-rounded athletes type of team. So to answer your question in a long way, Silver Creek would be my final answer.
Yeah, you mentioned Cam Banks. So if you went back to last season and listened to the very first episode in the first 5 minutes of us talking about basketball, you, me, and Sabe, one of the first questions that you asked was about Cam Banks and her departure to prep school. And collectively, we had all kind of talked about we wouldn't be shocked if she came back. And here we are now spinning it forward. And she's not only back, but she's back with her sister. She's back with her dad at Crispus Attucks and now in 3A. And when Cam Banks left, I mean, she was widely accepted as one of the best players in that class. And I think she's easily forgotten because we just have recency bias with who we watch. And no one's really seen Cam play outside of, if you're really involved in the club circuit, you would have seen her play a bunch. But high school basketball in Indiana, you know, to the people that really limit themselves to that audience, Cam Banks's return is a very big deal. And so I, for one, am very interested to see her just for, without getting too much into detail, just I'm really anxious to see her play basketball. And we'll see. Very similarly to Lanaya Wills, I think her Miss Basketball candidacy will come down to her success and what she can do at Attucks. So
that'll be an interesting debate and one that we'll save for another episode of just how that's viewed and how it's unpacked. Their schedule's okay. I'm curious to see when we get into the city tournament time and you're playing teams like Chatard and they'll see them again in the sectional, maybe Heritage Christian, maybe a Cathedral, teams like that. I'm curious to see how things go, how she looks there, but it feels like those will kind of be the games that she's judged on. We'll see. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Let's see who else we had on that list there. Evansville Central, Maddie Shirley. I know that she had a big summer. She's an established talent from down in the Evansville area. I feel like I've heard her name up around here too, but what do you know about Central and the Shirley kid, Danny?
Yeah, Central probably is, you know, and I'm trying to be respectful to Memorial here, but I think in 3A, Central probably is the school. And I think Maddie Shirley has earned that for Evansville Central. But they will be the team to watch that can be a deep run, that can come up, I guess it's I-69 now, come up to Indianapolis and represent the Evansville area in the state championship. She's got good length, you know, her ability to make shots. Last year, you know, there were some people that kind of, they employed the analogy of her to like Julianne Woodard. You know, and I would say that's accurate, but I do think Maddie is maybe a little bit better from maybe 18 and feet out than what Woodard was, where Woodard might have had the advantage against a kid like Maddie Shirley from 5 feet in and around the basket and things like that. But Maddie's going to be the central piece to really Evansville and what happens in 3A. You know, we mentioned, you know, Memorial too. We just had, you know, like Riley Kanan, for example. She just committed to Butler. So, you know, one of the highly ranked 27s that a lot of people maybe don't know in the Indianapolis area. You know, she's really kind of a 2-level scorer right now, can add the 3rd level and can score the basketball and do a lot of different things. But she's now given her commitment to Austin Parkinson at Butler. So she's going to be a name that people like to follow too. But yeah, probably Evansville Memorial and Evansville Central, probably the 3A schools out of the Evansville area.
Swinging it local here for a minute. Indian Creek is an interesting team. They're in the same section as Roncalli. We can talk about both of them kind of in one swoop. But Indian Creek, they lose Faith Wiseman, who's at IU now. They lose Lauren Foster, who's just a really, really good all-around player. And I think because of that, they're going to fly under the radar for a lot of people. But I look at them and what they have coming back with Ayla Lawler, Bree Galt, who's a senior. She is a senior now. She was averaging 3.4 steals per game before she got hurt. Jasmine Day, Reese Tummel are going to move into some bigger roles after getting experience. It feels like a deeper team maybe than people realized. And Indian Creek feels like maybe a sleeper team there. Challenge will be in that sectional is Roncalli, which has Elliot Leffler, Lydia Staley, Reagan Turk are both D1 volleyball players. Brenna Kearney is just a great defender. Doesn't put up huge numbers, but she's just a really solid defender for them. Sarah Roscoe is the team's 2nd leading scorer. She's back there, so she provides some good leadership. It feels like pieces are there too for Roncalli, and that's setting up to be a really fun section with those two.
Yeah, they got a stable of guards at Roncalli. You know, another name too back at Indian Creek is Ellie Oliver. You know, I think she's going to be in a more prominent role at Indian Creek now. And, you know, sometimes it's like in college football, right? It's like, you know, like you lose Quinn Ewers to an injury and then you replace him with like Arch Manning, and another 5-star. It's kind of the same thing. It was such a Faith Wiseman centric basketball team last year that maybe the production and the ability that Ellie Oliver had to impact that basketball team wasn't used as much, and they probably didn't have to, so they could bring her along a little slowly. But she's got good size. She's over 6 feet tall. She's left-handed. She can make a three. She's got the build to be an impact high school basketball player. So I share your sentiment with Indian Creek, and we'll watch them in their post Wiseman years.
I remember Oliver. I couldn't remember who it was, but she's the one. I remember talking to Brian Ferris after a couple games last year, and Ellie was the one that he pointed out, like, keep an eye on her, big post player and kind of the heir apparent to Wiseman, which is, obviously a high bar to ascribe to a kid, but I mean, that's the type of build she has. And again, another reason for optimism with them. Quick shout out to Beech Grove too. They have Miley Bowling, who's closing in on 1,000 career points. And then Harper Moore is just, again, freakish athlete, great softball player, plays a little soccer too, and also a standout basketball player as well. Elsewhere in Class 3A, Bishop Chatard is going to be really good this year. They're in that same sectional with Crispus Attucks. Anna Caskey's committed to Belmont for softball, but she was good for a double-double last year. And then Olivia Berzai, I saw her play soccer. I mean, the kid's bigger and stronger than she was last year as a sophomore, and she was a really big and strong sophomore. So that's a really good 1-2 punch in the front court. And then Betsy Tragesser came into her own as a point guard as the season progressed and averaged 4 assists a game. And Alex Kendall, too, kind of fits in that boat and adds some extra depth to the forward court at Bishop Chatard.
Yeah, and Gretchen Miles' outfit down in Washington too. I think we had just mentioned them, but to talk about some of their individual pieces, Katie Reed has had as good of a summer as any of these Indiana prospects had in regards to like college recruitment. I think she is now solidly in the center of the conversation as one of the better players in that class. But it doesn't stop with Katie Reed. I mean, they have Gilly and Hawk and things like that. So the expectations are super high with Coach Miles. And had a really nice conversation with Gretchen this summer for the first time. And everything that they have done summer-wise, training-wise, practice-wise, film-wise, scheme-wise, and things like that are with the idea that they want to win the state championship this year. So their expectations are very high. They certainly have the pieces to do it. And there's great tradition down there at Washington, starting really on the boys' side with the Zeller kids. But now we have this little pocket of, of girls basketball here in Washington. And that's a community that if they start to win games late and start to go on the postseason run, they're going to travel really well. Everything is going to be a home game. It'll be virtually impossible to go into that place and win. But that's a really good basketball team with a lot of really good individual pieces. And Coach Miles she's got a wagon.
One other team that I wanted to touch on in 3A before I move on, and that's Danville. Friend of the show, Kaylee May, has a great group returning. She graduates 8 seniors, but you get Emma Anslet back, Addison Davis, Maddie Wethington back. Emma Anslet, interestingly, I'm going to have a story on this hopefully next week, but she almost decided to graduate early and quit basketball last year. Changed her mind amidst the state run to semi-state last year and is back for her senior year. And with her back, I mean, it just makes such a well-rounded Danville team that looks really dangerous with that top 3, and they slot in there as one of those 3A contenders.
Yeah. And then, before we turn the page to 4A, which I'm sure everybody's kind of hanging on to wait on too, Jennings County enters the post-Julianne Woodard years. And I don't know if anybody knew really how good Julianne Woodard was going to be. And there's a lot of people that if you asked them, a lot of people that know a lot about Indiana girls high school basketball, if you ask them who the best player in 24 was, all due respect to the tremendous basketball players like Spreen and Wilson and kids like Woodard would have been a lot of people's answer. But now Woodard has gone on to East Lansing to play her collegiate basketball for Robin Freilich at Michigan State, and it leaves it leaves the cupboard with Molly Ernstis on the top shelf. And so Molly, who could play Robin to Woodard's Batman this year, now has to be the alpha option there. So can she do it? Very similarly to what I said about Kenzie Cook, can she make all of the teammates better? But Christy Sigler has a very unique a unique transition this year in changing who they are, in playing through a kid like Woodard. You want to get her a touch on every possession in different spots. All of their baseline out of bounds packages or sideline out of bounds packages. They ran a lot of sets where the ball would reverse from one side to the other, and then you get weak side entry into the post just to get Woodard a touch, and you would get collapse into the middle of the floor. It's how Molly, who is pretty close to a 40% 3-point shooter, and kid can really stick it. And so I think it'll be interesting to see her transition into the alpha role and what Jennings County can do in their post-Woodard years.
Transition is up to 4A. Let's start with South Bend, Washington. This feels
Loaded.
like kind of like their last swing at the big prize, potentially. I mean, at least for now, for a little bit. It feels like maybe a rebuild, but anyway, I digress. Kira Reynolds, Raya Wilson, Monique Mitchell, the big three that you need to know about, plus Michaela McNeil, Kira Lowe. Everything's there. They're stacked. They're big. They're athletic. They're fun to watch. Steve's a great coach. I mean, where do you rank them in Class 4A, and what do you make of their prospects coming into the year?
Well, the individual pieces are, I mean, it's a select basketball team. I mean, it's so good. For me, it comes down to Kira Reynolds what kind of a year is she going to have? And I say this because I've had conversations with Steve about it. She's going to approach this season with a chip on her shoulder. I mean, there's some things that we've been going on in regards to like national rankings and what people are saying about the kids in the 25 class that Steve and Kira and Marcy and the South Bend, Washington community hear. And so I would suspect that if she can remain healthy, she's going to have a higher level of engagement in proving things that maybe we've ever seen with any of the Reynolds kids, quite honestly. So she is, and there's a lot of people that don't really see her in the Indianapolis area as much. If you follow her on the AAU circuits, she's a completely different basketball player there, and so impactful. She's I think she's got 4 stars. I think ESPN has her as a 4-star athlete. She is so good, but she's also so unique in the things that she can do. So Steve, to his credit, has always tried to be on the cutting edge of what people are doing. So there were a lot of times where they were playing her at pinch post. There was a lot of times where they were playing her at point last year. Probably obviously earlier in her career when they had kids like the sisters, Mila and Amaya, she was really kind of down on the block. So, what Steve got this year for Kira, her development of her game will be interesting to track. But for me, South Bend, Washington comes down to what does Kira Reynolds do this year?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, for Indiana area fans, you get to see them twice over a week in November. They'll be at Lawrence Central, which we mentioned earlier. That's like must-see entertainment. And then they're going to play Lawrence North. They do the tour of Lawrence Township. They play them on November 30th, right after Thanksgiving at Josh Sneakers for Sable, as it's henceforth known on this podcast, on November 30th. So that'll be a really good game too. And in talking to the Lawrence North girls out during media day for the Indy Star, they're a little salty about what happened when they got, beaten around a little bit at the summer event. So that's going to be a fun game with some juice to it, and both teams looking to send a message and pick up a signature win. And then at the end of the year, South Bend, Washington will be down here again with North Central on January 18th. If you want to get a look at them, a nice little afternoon matinee to close out the regular season. So that'll be an interesting game.
Is my recollection correct, real quick though? Is my recollection correct that their season ended at the hands of Lake Central twice, each of the last 2 seasons?
Regionals last year, semi-state the year before.
That's what I thought. So, I don't know. Maybe there was something about the way Coach Huppenthal defended them. Maybe there was something in their heads. Maybe there was a mental hurdle. I don't know how to qualify why they lost that basketball game twice, but they did. And Lake Central certainly is going to still be good, but they do graduate a lot of pieces. We'll get into them. But that north side, above Fort Wayne, kind of taking it from the region, extending it all the way over to South Bend. There's a lot of teams up there now, whereas in previous years, you might you might not have such a depth of talent. But I do think that the north side of the state is wide open. That brings Northridge back in. It brings Penn back in. Let's not forget Lily Barnes at Valparaiso.
Warsaw.
And then, and I'm using this as the natural transition to Warsaw. I mean, are we too soon on the Warsaw thing? What's your take on this? I mean, that's going to be the team that is going to have a gigantic target on their back. I think most of the pundits would say that's probably the team that's going to come out if it's not South Bend, Washington. So, I don't know. What do you make of the Warsaw thing?
I mean, they're so good. They have so much talent returning, right? I mean, Brooke Winchester's a senior. You have Bricker. You have Zartman. I mean, all the pieces are there. We saw them. I think we were both at a couple of their games at the Charlie Hughes event at HSE. I seen them there. I got the chance to talk to them there. I mean, just everybody's back from a team that came up a little bit shorter of expectations last year, but you could argue now they're on schedule. Now it's like this is the year for them to run deep if they can get through what you correctly called just a wide open north. I mean, they graduated one of their big senior – or no, I'm sorry, the Max Preps is all goofed up. But, yeah, I mean, it's just such a talented team. So many shooters. They can shoot the lights out. It just – I think if memory serves, last year was just kind of the question of what happens when the three ball's not falling. Can you adjust and adapt that way? And I would think so with everybody a year older, a year wiser. And, man, I mean, just the weapons that they have on that team are unbelievable.
Yeah, the line of demarcation for good three-point shooting in high school basketball has always been arguably 30, 33%. A lot of that comes from like advanced statistics and points per possession. So, just to kind of get up on a horse here, if you had 10 possessions and you're a 33% shooter, and in those 10 possessions, you shot a three every single possession and you make 33% of them, you're going to get 3 points for every made three. That is 0.99 points per possession. 1.0 is really good. Okay. The reason why I give you that background is Brooke Zartman shot 45% from the three line last year. Like 45% is a video game number. And it isn't because they didn't know who she was. She did this with the idea that we're going to stay home and always have a hand in her face and we're going to limit the help. But 45% is, it's 1.45 per possession. It's just crazy. And then you bring in, middle ball screen with Bricker and Winchester. That's why people love Warsaw. Is because not only do they have the good individual pieces, but the way that they've chosen to construct that basketball team and attack you offensively with Bricker and Winchester in the middle of the floor and the wings and the three-point line being anchored with kids like Zartman. She's way above that Mendoza line that I was talking about. But 45%, that's a joke of a number. And to put that into perspective too, I think Jayla Lampley shot 39% from three, Makaluski 41% from three, Molly Ernst is 39% from three. But you got to get into kids like Ava Grant. Ava Grant last year shot darn near 50%. I think it was 48 point something from three. Zartman's right there. So this is one of the best shooters in the state, regardless of class. I would go as far as to say she's one of the best shooters in the Midwest at that class. And so if they can put it all together and stay healthy and find a way to get stops, you're not going to have to worry about the offensive end there.
50% of their shots came from three. If my math is correct, over 50% of their shots were from three. The one thing that I'm curious to see with Warsaw is how the strength of schedule looks at year's end, because right now it looks fine, but you don't have a Brownsburg like you did last year. It'd be fun to see them against an HSE teams like that, even a Lawrence Central again or a Lawrence North. Some teams like that, just to see how they match up, but they will at least play Homestead. They'll play Northridge in a conference game. They travel to Penn, and they host Valparaiso, and they host Snyder. Snyder could maybe be one of those sneaky teams that we're talking about later in the year as a sneaky contender to win there. But it'll be interesting to see how the strength of schedule factor and component fits into all this. But my gosh, the talent is really there, Danny, like you just mapped out. And video game numbers for them as a team.
Yeah.
I'll let you take us to the next school. You transitioned so beautifully to Warsaw. I want to just let you keep that momentum going. Well,
let's just head down the state. Fort Wayne it's got to be Homestead, right? And Homestead and everybody else. Northrop is going to have something to say about it in the end. Snyder's going to have something to say about it in the end. But there's no more Jordan Poole at Snyder.
Or
You
Kira
have
Sims or
the
Janae
Waring. Yep, absolutely. You have the Waring transfer to Northrop by Katie Jackson has a great outfit there. But Homestead, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that would pick them to win the 4A state championship. And I'll let you kind of talk about, your thoughts with just, Epps won because her, you've talked to her quite a bit. You've interviewed her. We've had her on the show. And she's a part of a really, really good 26 class. What do you make of Homestead? How do you assess their position as the favorite in Fort Wayne?
They're just so deep. Like I'm putting together these player rankings or whatever, looking through who other people say are the best, looking at college offers that kids have, looking at stats from the year before and all that. I mean, it's just crazy how many times Homestead, South Bend, Washington was kind of the same way. Just how many times names of their kids just kept popping up. It's unbelievable. Obviously, it starts with Epps. She's just so well balanced, so versatile as a guard. I think I put it in one of the stories, just like her, where she had like a block, recovered the rebound, then fired a beautiful pass down, and then I think somehow got it and scored herself. I don't know. It was insane. It just kind of encapsulated just how this kid's able to impact the game in so many different ways. Gabby Helsom's another one where she's another really big up-and-comer. Winnie Ankenbrook, her name has been popping up a lot more too as college offers continue pouring in for her. And I feel like I'm just barely scratching the surface. Like there's even more pieces around them. And it's just such a well-coached and deep team. They had the experience of a semi-state run last year where they lost to Lake Central, who eventually made it to the 4A final. It feels like everything's there for them. And I think that it's setting up in the North for potentially an HSE Homestead rematch, be it in the regional or the semi-state. There's obviously a lot of things that have to happen before then, specifically with HSE and some demons that they need to exercise first. But good golly, Danny, that Homestead team is something else.
And the rich get richer too, because in 28, they're going to be better at the end of the season exponentially than they will be at the beginning of the season, because they can bring along not one impact freshman, but two. Delaney Knoll, a 28, who a lot of people might not know that name, is, some of the showcases, like Prep Girls Showcase, there was a half at the Prep Girls Showcase where I think she assisted or scored on 29 of 31 points that her team scored at Prep Girls, like in one of those showcases. She's really good. And then they have another one too with multiple Division I offers already named Susie Perigo. Like the way Parker is going to choose to bring them along, I think is going to be an interesting watch, but I wouldn't be surprised to see even maybe their starting five change from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, which is going to change scout in how teams choose to play them. And you have to really invalidate some of the early stuff that they're going to do. But yeah, Epps, we talked about her and we will talk about her through the entire season. Helsom and Ankenbrook, you mentioned, are as good of, I would say 3-and-D players, but it would almost be insulting to just call them 3-and-D players. They do so much else on the floor that is so good. They have like Ava Scarberry in 27, but then they skip to this dream 28 class. I just mentioned Perigo and Knoll. There's also other kids, and I don't know what's going to happen with who's going to get varsity minutes and who's not and things like that. But these two kids are two of the 5 best 28s, and they're on Homestead of all teams.
The schedule's great. Any people looking to see them, they come down to Pike on November 16th. That'll be your first chance to see them. They'll also be down in Noblesville a week later. They're in the Hall of Fame Classic. They open against Lawrence Central, with the winner taking either North Knox or HSE. They host North Central or at Snyder. There's a lot of good games, and they'll be at Carmel at the end of the year as well. So it's going to be a fun team to watch. I'm really excited to see them, especially against a team like Pike, we'll talk about here in a minute, who's kind of on the upswing, and it feels like Keith's got some things cooking over there. Another team from the northern part of the state, kind of the north central part of the state. How about McCutcheon? Lily Graves going into her sophomore season. We're going to get to see her against Hannah Menser, another of the state's top sophomores, right off the bat to start the season next week. That's going to be phenomenal. With McCutcheon, it kind of felt like the pieces around Lily Graves are coming around a little bit, kind of growing, and I'm excited to see how everybody around her takes the next step. Obviously just excited as I am to see Lily and what she does for an encore to a brilliant freshman year.
It was a brilliant freshman year. It was also really difficult and frustrating to watch that game versus Homestead at Marion High School last year in the postseason tournament. McCutcheon won sectionals and was just completely outmanned and outclassed in that regional basketball game. And Lily just couldn't. They just sat inside the pack line. They sat on help line. Anytime she tried to drive, there were people around her. They stayed with her. I mean, some people will they'll kind of drop off low, but her usage rate, if you remember, we talked about this last year, was like in the 60-70% range. Like 50% is high, but she was like in the 60 to 70% range for usage in regards to how much she assisted her other players, how much she scored and things like that. But yes, they do have a couple of transfers. They need to get healthy. But the supporting cast around Lily will give her an opportunity to really establish herself. But the way McCutcheon was able to win sectionals being led by a freshman is not something that should be breezed over. Lily came in with the high expectations and the name, and there were a lot of people around here that may be critical of her at times, but let's just not erase the fact that she won sectionals and led them as a freshman. And I remember going to her first basketball game against Cascade last year, her first varsity basketball game ever. And she let the game come to her, and Jeff Canoy, the coach, brought the game to her. But there was a time where that had whittled down. I think it was a 35-32 basketball game late in the fourth quarter. Jeff called timeout, came out of the timeout. Lily Graves goes on a 10-0 run by herself. At the risk of redundancy, I remember telling that story last year, the first time I saw her, but that's the bar that Lily has set for herself. Her college recruitment has taken off and people know who she is now. So to have a supporting cast, a credible supporting cast around her that can make plays, in just the sample size of one against Homestead last year, that's what they needed and didn't have. All due respect to that roster last year, but that's what they needed and didn't have, and they figured to have this season.
Curious to see. I remember last year was watching her. It's like you can see the potential, see the moves where she's able to get to the basket, fight her way through. Now I'm curious to see strength-wise, is she strong enough and able to finish some of those opportunities more consistently? And that kind of feels like the next evolution in her game, is able to finish those things. And that's obviously going to come as you get older and you're able to hold your own against older girls inside. So I'm curious to see that, and I'm excited to see them next week, obviously, against Plainfield.
Yep.
Any other teams from the north side before we venture into the Indy area that we're overlooking, Danny?
No, not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. Quickly mentioned Lake Central obviously has Vanessa Wimberly coming back, an Indiana All-Star from a year ago. Valparaiso has Lily Barnes, who probably will be an Indiana All-Star as well.
She looks healthy too, and she looks great. So she's going to be good. Be good to see her.
Good stuff. We touched on Northridge as well. Let's dive into the Indy area. Let's start with Hamilton Southeastern, because I think that they are probably the Indy area's favorite on the north side. Obviously, it's just the 8-team section, or the sectional 8 teams in there from the north, but they're the favorites in the sectional. It's just a matter of, will this be the year that they get over the hump? We saw Maya. We talked about it before on this show, but Maya McAlusky's willingness to play a little bit more physical, battle for rebounds, that sort of thing inside feels like a big step for her. KG Holman is an unbelievable point guard, following in the footsteps of Liv Brown. And then you have Kayla Stidham, who's just clutch, like with her ability to knock down shots. I'm curious to see if she's able to kind of maintain the consistency that she had at the beginning of last year as a shooter, maintain that through the course of an entire season. That's going to be big. Ant Green is kind of their unsung hero, really big piece defensively, made some big plays for them in big games. The big question is going to be, how do they address the lack of size they have? They don't really have that true post player. I'm curious. It feels like it could be an issue against a team like Fishers, which has Nevaeh Dickman. Noblesville, which has CeCe Quigley. Carmel has some big kids. Maybe not so much against a Westfield or a Zionsville, but we'll see. But later in the tournament, obviously, when you go up against some of those teams with the true post players, I'm curious to see how that impacts HSE.
Yeah, for me, HSE is I think, pay attention to the beginning of the season, because Yes, they virtually return the same roster. They're going to add some pieces. I don't know what they have a lot of really good 28, like a lot of really good 28s. I think their JV team's going to be awesome, by the way. But the development of those kids, dissimilar to what's happening at Homestead, I don't know how much of a role they'll play in a postseason run. I think we might see a kid, maybe two, kind of emerge in kind of spot minutes, but they are so complete. I mean, and you had mentioned the lack of presence, inside, and that's a popular thing to talk about with HSC, but sometimes you can be big without having a post player. Like Maya's 6'3" now. Like, she's huge. I mean, KK Holman is, there's not been one time that anybody's watched KK Holman play basketball and been like, that kid's too small. Like, never once. I mean, she plays bigger. She's not afraid to get inside the paint. You have kids like Van Heusen who do very formidable jobs against, teams that have Avery Gordon, Kira Reynolds kinds of players. But the reason why I say watch them at the beginning of the year is because, for me, the success of Hamilton Southeastern is going to be contingent upon Chris Huppenthal's effect in rejoining the HSC staff. Now, Brian Satterfield stayed on as the head coach, but for those that don't know, Chris Huppenthal is now his associate head coach or lead assistant or whatever it is that you want to call it or define it. And that was the last head coach on the girls' side of Southeastern to lead them to a state championship with the Amaya Hamilton, Taya Irvin, and Sydney Parish basketball teams at Southeastern. In watching them at the Charlie Hughes, they were doing a lot of the things and working on a lot of the things. I'm not here to say that this is their identity. I don't talk to Sat and Hupp often enough to be able to say this is what they're consciously trying to do, but they were definitively running the same offensive system that they ran for the Courtney Osborne teams at Southeastern that Huppenthal coached, the Taya Reimer teams at Southeastern that he coached, and the Sydney Parish teams at Southeastern that he coached. We saw a lot of the same offensive principles that they had run with Chris Huppenthal. So there is going to be a schematic change on offense with what they do because they added Chris Huppenthal to the staff. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how different they look. And if they do look different, people are going to have to reset on how to guard them, because you're right. Last year, the narrative was, what are we going to do with McAlusky and Stidham? Are we going to stay home? Where are we going to pick up Holman? Are we going to pick her up at the half court line? Are we going to sit on pack line? Are we going to pick her up at the free throw line and give her the 3-pointers and things like that? Everybody knows that, but you want to know who else knows that? Satterfield and Huppenthal. So I would assume that there's been a considerable amount of work put into their offensive identity and what they're going to do, and try to be harder to guard, because they're sure as heck hard to guard right now with all of the offensive weapons that they have.
They come out of the gate right away next week with Lawrence North, so that's going to be a great game. And then, it's Ben Davis, Franklin, Cathedral, all of whom are those are games that they should win, frankly. And I think, Ben Davis, Franklin are in a bit of a rebuild right now. Cathedral, bit of rebuild as well, though they do have some good pieces, all three of them. Then it's Franklin Central, which is going to be dangerous and looking for another signature win. And Brownsburg, which has Avery Gordon and is looking to develop some guards. And then a team from Chicago at the Sable Sneakers thing, and then Noblesville, and it just kind of goes up from there. So I'm curious to see, Danny, like you said, how many kinks and things are able to work out during that little 3-game stretch there after Lawrence North to kind of get things, and how smooth it looks then coming into the post-game Thanksgiving run there with Brownsburg, Chicago, Noblesville, and then Evansville Memorial and Evansville North.
Yeah. I'm really interested to see too how teams, how they want to guard McAlusky and Holman. Okay. Like, both of them are on huge, steep trajectories in the national landscape too. I mean, I think if you look at the national rankings for Maya McAlusky, I think there's only 2 players ahead of her right now that don't have 5 stars. Like, she's going to be a 5-star. She's going to get her 5th star. And that's a huge accomplishment for her. And KK Holman is headed in the same direction. And by this time next year, we might be saying the same thing about her, that she's an inevitable 5-star athlete too. I mean, she's getting huge offers and is really an impossible matchup. But Maya gets to start her, Miss Basketball campaign. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention too, her Miss Basketball campaign is largely dependent on HSE's team success this year. I mean, it just really, really is. And she knows that, and everybody else knows that, and everybody else is going to be watching it. But here you have a kid who, you know, and again, it's just, it's different to talk about it, you know, high school to AAU and things like that. But I mean, her efficiency as an offensive basketball player was the best in the country last year across 3 reputable shoe circuits. Like it was 1.17 points per possession. And so she just makes shots. Maya just makes shots. And she works on her game every day, and there are different shots that she was making when her sister was there and when she was younger. I mean, she just scores in a lot of different ways. I think she really dedicates herself to really working to the free throw line, where she's a tremendous foul shooter. So I think Maya's campaign is, like I said, HSE is, if you want to accomplish the individual goals, it's going to have to come through team success. And that's the underlying theme in watching Southeastern this year.
The next best team, I think, in that section, at least for my money, is Fishers. Nevaeh Dickman, Allison Choi both feels like they're on the verge. Like, they're really good as juniors. Now it feels like they're ready to really explode and have phenomenal years. Riley Shellhammer comes in. I got to see over the summer. Was pretty impressed seeing her. And just a lot of pieces coming in. And the thing that I always go back to with Fishers is Lauren Votaw is just such a good coach and just so good at maximizing the talent that she has. And this year, I mean, you have some really talented pieces, like no names like they've had in the past, but it's just this team and the chemistry and all that. I don't think you can discount any of those factors in this group and their potential. And Fishers has won the sectional before, not for nothing. Like, they had that experience. And same thing for Noblesville, which is a really big wild card, maybe the biggest wild card in 4A, because you have a known quantity with Meredith Tipner. How big of a jump are we going to see from CC Quigley as she goes into her junior year? She put up good numbers last year, but it's tough playing as a young kid in the post. Now she's a junior. She's not a young kid anymore. Curious to see how she does. And then what about Allie Hutchinson and Kate Rollins? You know, Hutchinson had some big shots last year, some big threes in the semi-state and in some regular season games. Can they take the next step? Where does the depth come from? How do the pieces come and fill in around there? What is Donna Buckley? You know, what is she able to do with the piece that she has? But again, the Millers have won before. They know what it takes to succeed come February. And I think those are two things that can't be discounted when analyzing that sectional. And it's probably something we're going to visit down the line.
Yeah, Fishers also has Alana Anthony. I think you nailed it with the Shellhammer, you know, coming in. I mean, this is as widely anticipated debut. You know, it's probably the, you know, you're going to want to follow the arc of her career. But she's a really good basketball player and is going to handle a lot of the point guard duties. You mentioned Choi and Dickman. Alana Anthony too, is a kid who played really well for Fishers last year. Provides them the same strength and athleticism that Choi provides them, and Dickman, obviously. So you got an ultra athletic basketball team. Shellhammer also, and the one thing about Riley is she's a shot maker, and the question still remains on what Riley does best right now. Okay. And I don't want to be unfair to a 28 who's never played a high school basketball game yet, but right now, her ability to make shots might be her greatest value to that team, because it's probably not what Dickman does best, although she can shoot it. It's not what Choi does best, although she can shoot it. And it's not what Anthony does best, but she can shoot it. If it's what Shellhammer does best and Shelly makes shots, you fill a big void of what you think might be a discrepancy in their resume to knock off HSE in the sectional. But you're right. You know, Votaw and Fishers will be right there. You transitioned to, you know, the rest of that sectional. I mean, I don't know how to just breeze across it, but yeah, look, Meredith Tipner is entering her post-Wilson years. Mm-hmm. Let's say this about Meredith, okay? Meredith Tipner played in the same starting 5 in the state champ with Ashlyn Shade, okay, who you'll see on ESPN a dozen times this year. She shared the backcourt with Reagan Wilson last year, who's now at Iowa State and an Indiana All-Star and one of the finalists for Indiana Miss Basketball, okay? It is now finally Meredith Tipner's team. Okay. So we don't know what this looks like. Okay. And the one thing I know about Meredith is that she's going to make Quigley better. She's going to make Hutch better. She's going to make Rollins better. How good will determine their team's success. But Tipner and Noblesville will be very different for the first time in a very long time because 22 is not in the backcourt anymore.
It'll be interesting to see. Then there's some sneakers in there too. I mean, Carmel. Izzy Shepard, Mackenzie Wood, Lauren Perry. Like if you had to pick a sleeper team that could really raise a ruckus in there, it'd probably be Carmel. I mean, the big thing for them is just a matter of staying healthy. I feel like injuries have kind of messed with their past couple seasons with some bumps in the road and whatnot. Taryn Fisher's back as the team's second leading rebounder. Mallory Borquin, another kid who averaged over 9 points. Like it's a veteran team that's ready to kind of, make some waves and win some more games. I mean, they won 11 games last year, not for nothing. Westfield, kind of a similar thing. They're deep. They have good chemistry and versatility, but they're replacing their two leading scorers from a year ago. They have some options there with Van Dyke and Crockett. And then some other good returners coming in too, who are out of college bound, Megan Hamilton, Michaela Hatcher, Sam Price. And then Zionsville, it's definitely kind of a rebuilding year for Zionsville, but it's not going to be, looking at the roster and getting, a feel for who they have come back. It's not going to be nearly as rough as what I thought maybe it would have been at the end of last year. Because you have Caroline Sampson coming back, who was really good in that post role for them, kind of sharing time. And then Mackenzie Chapman, we've discussed before. I mean, that kid's a bowling ball. And after averaging 7 points a year, I'd imagine she'll probably double that total this year. I mean, just the way that she attacks the basket and the way that she shined as a freshman, I'm expecting big things from her as a sophomore. And fun fact, another friend of the show in the coaching business, I hear that Maddie Nolan has stepped in as a volunteer assistant for the time being at Zionsville. So that's a fun fact to know and tell.
I was in Charleston, South Carolina over fall break walking around, and we were heading down toward King Street. And if you're in Charleston, you know that's a great city to kind of walk around in. And as I was a block away crossing the street, the person crossing the street the other way was none other than Maddie Nolan. So we got to small talk a little bit 2 weeks ago. I actually didn't know that she was going to be a part of that, but that's great because she was such a good basketball player and such a fun kid to watch. Ended up leading her Zionsville team to the state championship where they ended up getting beat by Lawrence North. And Jayla Smith, the eventual Miss Basketball, hit a big three late in that basketball game, but that was Chris Gibbons' swan song at Lawrence North before Stephen kind of took the reins. But I'm going to use this as an opportunity to dive in on Carmel a little bit. Carmel had a game last year against Noblesville. You guys will remember it as you shift your heads back into basketball mode here, where they beat Noblesville head-to-head at home. And Mackenzie Wood was awesome in that basketball game. We really need Mackenzie to be healthy this year because she is one of the best basketball players, not only in the county, not only in that sectional, but also in the States. She's a bona fide Division I recruit. And the pieces around her are really good too. We talked about, 40% 3-point shooters like Lauren Perry, who committed to play her collegiate basketball is 40 plus percentage 3-point shooter. But we talked about Shellhammer's effect as a 28 in that sectional, but there's three of them at Carmel who all really kind of figure to be a part of the rotation. Again, we'll see how this plays out. And I hate talking about these 28s, but I also love it because I just think it's fun. And these kids they've trained, and I've known who they are forever. But Catherine Bassey, Maddie Wallace, and Bella Ramsey, three of the better 28s in the States, all happen to be on the same team. Now, there is a position battle between those three kids, but the future is very bright for Carmel. And if they can start to win some basketball games early in the year, teach themselves how to win, keep Mackenzie healthy, and then develop their 28s along the way, they're going to be deeper and they're going to be harder to beat as the year goes on. And we know that because the rendition of the team last year that didn't have Ramsey, Wallace, and Bassey beat Noblesville, who many picked when they were down to the Final Four, who many picked to win the state championship. Many on this podcast even picked them to win, and they just disposed of them. So Carmel will be an interesting one, but I do think it's contingent upon Mackenzie's health. and putting all those pieces together. But, Izzy Shepard, she went through a stretch there when she was coming back from the injury, who was good of as good of a 3-point shooter as really anybody. And you mentioned Taryn, and Mallory's going to be healthy this year. So, Mallory will be back, but yeah, watch out for the Greyhounds. They haven't really been a part of our sectional 8, I guess core, if you will, but that figures to be different this year.
Absolutely. Moving around the area, Pendleton Heights, Casey Warfel's back for her senior year. She's phenomenal. Ada Hupfer, I mean, she's already establishing herself among the best centers in the state. And then Olivia Jones is just a defensive monster and can score the ball as well. They got a Texas transfer in Aubriana Gray, who they're excited about. And then in that section, Mount Vernon's in a bit of a rebuild, but I feel like with them, you can never really count them out. And they have some young freshmen coming in who are going to contribute right away. And then Greenfield Central, I know they kind of fly under the radar a little bit, but Sonsini, Brown, McConnell, Silcox, Heron, I mean, they have a lot of really good pieces there at Greenfield Central setting it up. So while Pendleton Heights is the favorite to come out of there and compete in the South, it's not going to be easy with Greenfield Central lurking right there.
Yeah, I really like Pendleton Heights this year. They're so complete. And Olivia Jones and Casey Warfel Casey, if you remember, that's as violent. That's a kid who attacks as violently as anybody else downhill. Like it's impossible to stay in front of her, and having coached against her, like you just can't, you can't, you have to just decide. And you can sit on her right hand, you can drop coverage on it, but it doesn't matter. Like she just gets to her spot. So she's relentless with the way that she attacks. And then of course we just follow the arc of Ada Hupfer and how she continues to come along and establish herself. Now she knows what varsity basketball looks like. She knows what it feels like. She knows what it sounds like. She knows the recovery. And now in her first off season, heading into what she knows, what she can expect, I would expect a big year from Ada Hupfer. And Olivia's really good. That's as complete of a basketball team as you might have, really, regardless of class. So Pendleton Heights is going to be really good this year. And so keep more than an eye on them.
Interesting to them. Greenfield Central was close last year. I think it was New Pal who took them out in the sectional where they were close. And now it's like, now's their time. With so many pieces coming back. They have the Forche kid too, who's a great softball player. They have so many pieces back. Now it's kind of like, can they take the next step and finally break through and get through and have some sectional success, which is something that's eluded them over the years. Mount Vernon, like we mentioned, it's kind of a look forward to the future for them, but I think it's a bright future. I think Julie Shelton's got some pieces coming in. A little bit of a tough year this year with having graduated Ellery Minch, the Indiana All-Star, but the pieces are there for this team to be back up soon. And heck, with their tendency to always just sort of pop up and win that sectional, it'd be foolish to count them out here in a few months.
Yeah, you're right. And you'd referenced, a lot of the incomers, like Zoe Wood is, Zoe Wood is a name that keeps coming up, and a lot of people really like her game, and she's downhill attacking, and she's a really good point guard. And, I saw her a little bit in the Charlie Hughes event too, and to see her, really start her 4-year basketball campaign. But she's another kid, very similarly to Warfel, that's really, really difficult to stay in front of. And so if she can get by people, make the right decisions, and just learn how to play through, varsity teammates that have been there, like Gabby Thomas and kids like that, Julie Shelton, death taxes. Julie Shelton is the podcast quote, and I'll use it in the first episode.
We should talk about the other team in Lawrence Township. That's Lawrence North. Kaya Hurt, Jemiah Thomas are back. Kiki Butler had a phenomenal summer, like a massive summer. Her name was everywhere. Naja Winston was really good last season. It feels like Kiki's on the same path. Then they had some other newcomers with the Bentley kid, Roberts, and then a trio of freshmen. But Steven has things rolling over there at Lawrence North, and it's just similar to HSE. It's just a question of, can you get over your Goliath? Can you get over this one hill that's proven insurmountable for them last season? And that's Lawrence Central.
I don't think that's different. I hate to say this because I like Steven, and many of the podcast audience knows that we're friends. Isn't it just, aren't you going to measure the success of Lawrence North season based on how they do against Lawrence Central? It's the game that they want. It's the person that stands in front of a deep postseason run for them. They were unable to get over the hump, like you had mentioned before. They had them on the ropes 3 times, and they couldn't get it done. And it's not going to be due to a lack of talent. They're just so talented. And so, I just boasted about my relationship with Steven, but I haven't talked to him about, kind of how the fall workouts had gone and how the open gym series have gone. But I mean, you have kids like Jemiah Thomas and Kaya Hurt and Naja Winston and Kiki Butler. I mean, every one of those kids is going to play Division I basketball. They have two really good 28s. And, Zion Hunt and Peyton, they're going to add strength, and you get the maturation of these 27s. And you mentioned like Brooklyn Roberts, for example. Like Brooklyn Roberts she was playing chunk junior varsity minutes last season, but is a really good basketball player that can now maybe fill in a Kamara Mills role or something like that. So we'll see what happens, but unfairly, I think deep down, I think they're probably measuring their season at the end when all's said and done is what's their record, how'd they do against Lawrence Central in the regular season, how'd they do against them in the Marion County tournament, and how did they do against them in sectionals.
I don't think it's that unfair, though, because when you think about it, those are the two biggest events of the year, right? The Marion County tournament, you're going to have to get through LC. Same for LC and LN, though, frankly. Like, that's how LC got there last year, was they got through LN. And the sectional, same thing. Like, if you want to keep your season going, you got to take down Goliath. Same thing for LC in years past, you know what I mean, where they also had to worry about Warren Central and Lawrence North. But point still stands. I don't think that it's unfair to suggest, or even outlandish or all that hot takey to suggest that that's kind of the bar for them this year. And
yeah,
I think that makes it fun. Like, this is a fun rivalry, and it's so cool to see, just like Lawrence Township basketball, where you have, two of the top team in the state, top 5, top 7 team right behind them. Like, it's crazy how good both teams are and how much fun it's going to be.
Yeah.
Elsewhere in that section of Warren Central, Danelle Jacobs is back. I'm excited to see what she does now that, she had a great season playing alongside her sister last year. I'm really excited to see what they do. Stacy Mitchell does such a great job with that program. North Central, same thing. We have such an experienced coach with Deanne Ramey. They don't have a ton of experience back. They graduated a lot of seniors, but Gabby Burris at least averaged 12 points a game. So they at least have some pieces to build around. The big thing that Ramey's looking at is going to be assists and playmaking and making sure that the defense is up and generating chaos and steals. And then Tech, same boat as everybody else. They graduated Kayla Lacombe, who's now playing in college. She averaged 27 a game. I mean, she was unbelievably fun to watch. But Michael Fox says it's going to be a bit of a retool year for him as well. So the top two dogs are the top two dogs in that sectional. I don't see it changing much over the next few weeks.
Yeah, Stacy Mitchell, and his identity. He won the 2019 state championship just 5 short years ago with Shayla Beeler, Sydney Dodd. Tally was on that team. That was a really good basketball team. But the identity of Stacy Mitchell basketball teams has always been just a real flat front 2-3 zone, which might be the way to beat a Lawrence Central, might be the way to beat a Lawrence Central, Lawrence North. And so they're going to be a tough out. Someone's going to have to beat a team like Warren Central against that zone and be really unique and maybe have to play the other one the night after, something like that. So I think that's going to be a unique story kind of, but yeah, Jacobs is good, like really good. If you don't know or familiarize yourself with her game. Yeah, she's really, really good.
That'll be fun. Plainfield, Brownsburg, and Pike and Avon are all stuffed in the same section on Ben Davis. Ben Davis won't be as big as they've been last year, and they're going to be young. But, I mean, again, Stan Benj, hard to bet against him. Avon, they have Anaya Smith back. They started off really strong last year. They kind of stumbled down the stretch. I think it was a 5 or 7-game losing streak for them going into sectional. That hurt, but they're back, and they should be pretty dangerous again. They're just small and quick. Pike exceeded all expectations. They were able to do what Avon was not, and they turned their season around after a 5-game losing streak going into sectional and ended up beating Franklin Central, almost upset Plainfield then in the regional. Brownsburg, we've talked about them a little bit. Avery Gordon's a monster in the post. It's just a question of where do the outside threats, who helps take the pressure off of her defensively, are from opposing defenses. That's the task facing our friend Josh Sable. And then Plainfield, they graduated Peyton Bang, but man, I mean, Ellie Stewart is really good, maybe an underappreciated athlete for just how well-balanced an athlete she is and how good of a defender she is. Berkeley Williams, Hannah Menser, Morgan Barnes as well. They're going to play fast. They're going to push tempo. They're going to look to turn teams over. So it's going to be a different looking playing field team, but a really talented one nonetheless. And I would just like to say I hate it that all of these teams are stuck in the same sectional. I think it's stupid.
Yeah, it's going to be a great sectional. And it might be this year's rendition of Sectional 8. Like I think it's wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Leading with Plainfield. I love watching Berkeley Williams play basketball. Like she's electric, and she's just the kind of kid. I've never coached her. I've only watched her play. I most recently watched her play in Rock Hill, South Carolina at the U.S. Open. And I was just, sitting on the sidelines, and I was just watching, and she's just, on that basketball team, I had like Holman on it and Ren on it and Wills on it. Like she was out there with a ton of talent. And she just went out there and did her job. And when she was pulled out of the game, she would come and do the same thing. She would sprint off the floor. She would give a high five to her coach, touch all of her teammates' hands along the way. She'd sit not on the end of the bench. Like there was no seat available from the end of the bench closest to the scores table to the end of the bench. And she would sit on the next closest. So there was no division. Every time she would pull her ponytail tight, and then she would wait for her opportunity, and then she would get her opportunity again in 3 or 4 minutes, and she'd go out there and play her butt off again. Mm-hmm. Like that kid is consummate teammate. And yes, they lose Peyton Benj, but with Menser a year older now, it's a Berkeley-centric basketball team, and her ability to make everybody better, I think she can do it. And I think Plainfield's going to be really good because of her, and I think going to be a fun watch. But that one right there is really the antithesis of what Brownsburg is, to get into Sable, mm-hmm. They're going to build around a kid who needs to receive the ball from other people. Right. So here you have a Avery Gordon centric basketball team. And let me add this. So Sabe and I, look, we text all the time. Okay. And we share notes, and we send each other Instagram reels, and we send each other sets, and we send each other PDFs, and we talk all the time. Okay. Sable, and let me digress here for a moment too. Like when JJ Redick got the Lakers job, the guy who everybody thought was going to get the job was Danny Hurley out of UConn. And Danny Hurley became very popular running kind of this new age grenade action, they call it, Hank. Okay. So they would run this UConn men would run this grenade action where they would throw skips against drop coverage to a post player and then run into some of their zoom actions. Okay. When Danny Hurley didn't get the Lakers job and JJ Redick did, the first play that the Lakers had in their first exhibition game was Danny Hurley's grenade action. And it was it was one of those things that a lot of basketball fans would have missed, but it was definitely a nod to, we can still be Danny Hurley's version of the Lakers just with JJ Redick coaching them. The reason why I give you that background is because everybody has not everybody, but there's some people have texted me and been like, well, this isn't a typical Josh Sable team. Okay. I would challenge you is to say this, just watch. He's going to do this just the same way he did it at Franklin, the same way that Redick ripped off the grenade action from. He's going to do what he does, and he's going to do it with different players. And so we talk at length about El McCullough, and we talk at length about kids like Morgan Montgomery and those other pieces. And we'll have a time to really unpack the individual pieces and the scheme that Sable's going to implement at Brownsburg. But it's going to look the same. And I'll tell you, I watched them play Valpo at the Charlie Hughes event. Okay. And they looked great. I mean, they boat raced everyone they played. Okay. And it looked different, and Avery looked athletic and healthy and great. So the Plainfield Brownsburg rivalry is already built in, but now when you have it as contrasting styles too, that's going to be so fun as the season unfolds as to who has the matchup advantage in that game.
That'll be great. Pike, we mentioned, I mean, Keith Hollins has them trending in the right direction. Sanaya Smith, Booker, Nicholson, Jeffers. You add in an Alana Devine from Ben Davis, who I know everybody's super excited for. Just so many pieces there. Avon's kind of a wild card there. I'm curious to see which Avon team we see, the one from the beginning of the year that was winning some games, building some momentum, are the one that kind of faded a little bit. There are some pieces to replace, but Anaya Smith's a really good guard. She should become the program's all-time leading scorer this year. Then you have McKaylee Butts and Maya Thompson back as well, plus Nevaeh Wren on defense. I think Wren missed last season, if memory serves, due to an injury. And then I just like the fact that Soraya Hart also plays rugby and is an all-stater in rugby. You don't see that very often. So
No, you don't.
Will Stahl's got things going in the right direction down there at Avon.
You're right about Pike. So Keith Hollins, he actually jokingly texted after one of your articles that you had posted where you had mentioned him, and he was like, "I hope Hank doesn't continue to write about Pike because he wants to fly under the radar." And I am just here to look straight into the screen and tell you, Keith, like, there's no hiding how good your basketball team is. There just isn't, man.
He's gonna be pissed Monday when this Fab 15 comes out too.
Right. Okay, so he's gonna be even more mad.
All right,
and he'll be mad. He will text me before, like, the minute that this comes out too. It'll fast forward all the way and see what we say about him. But you have to give them the sound that they have, because they had a turning point last year where, if you remember, you had mentioned that they went on that run. You quantified it. You were like, they won 4 of their last 5 games or something.
They
like
lost
that.
5 straight and then went on and won the sectional.
The second half of the Hamilton Southeastern game on the road was the turning points of their season last year. They were never the same since. And then when they went on to win sectionals, let's go back to, and Benj and all the Plainfield people will remember this. They were dominated by Pike in the first half of that basketball game.
That was crazy.
It's a 1-game regional now. Pike dominated it. And I remember watching it being like, oh my, like, because I thought Plainfield was going to win. And I'm just like, Keith is going to do this again. A couple of minor adjustments. They didn't make a couple of plays late. But yes, I do think that, yes, Booker being back and Sanaya Smith being back, like at the top 100, which is an individual showcase that they play in July through the IBCA. They sponsor it. Sanaya Smith, I watched maybe just 3 or 4 basketball games there, but was maybe the most impactful offensive basketball player that I saw in that event at the top 100. But yeah, you have Booker and Keith is really big on the Jeffers kid, like the you had mentioned. But yeah, the addition of Alana Devine as a bona fide kid that's going to do everything right. And there's familiarity with Keith and familiarity with Kamari and Sanaya and things like that. And I just think Pike is going to be, much to the chagrin of Keith Hollins, one of the preseason teams to watch.
Yep, absolutely, and I mean, deservedly so. Like, they're really good. I forgot too about that Hamilton Southeastern game. It was like a 5-point decision down the stretch. They came down late. Moving down now, Center Grove. They're an interesting team too, where they graduate a lot. They graduated their 3 big ones with Booker, Wirtz, and Audrey Ane. Bring back Lily Bischoff, who was a preseason super team pick. Ava Grant, who came up huge for them last year. They bring some varsity experience. And then they also added a move-in with Grayson Gillard, who moved in from Munster. And she put up 26 points, 8 rebounds, 6 steals a game as a sophomore. So that's a big add for them. And suddenly it looks like, at least on paper, that you have your 3 leading scorers there. So you fit those pieces in. You have a full spring and summer to work with Grayson on getting her acclimated to Kevin's system and the complexities with that. And, they're going to defend the hell out of you. So you have that going for you. But that sectional is going to be rough, man, because on the other side of it is Franklin Central, where you have Lily Graves as an Indiana All-Star and just a massively talented sophomore class in behind her. And they won 15 games, were the sectional favorites with such a young group last year. And then I have some other notes about Mooresville and Southport before we move on to whatever else we have. But I'll let you vamp a little bit if you'd like on both Center Grove and Franklin Central.
Yes, Center Grove, the south half of the state is now post Chloe Spring, post Julianne Woodard, post 24, Kimbrel Clem class there. Even Ane and Booker are gone. And so as we kind of sort out as we transition, I mean, it's well publicized in the basketball communities that Franklin Central has like the youth talent and things like that to be kind of the dominant team. Maybe moving forward over the next 3 or 4 years. But in this individual year, I really like Center Grove's roster this year. I really, really like it. And then the reason why I like it is because we were able to see the effects that Lily Bischoff has by removing Lily Bischoff from the floor in the basketball game last year. She is so good. We talk about how this kid needs to make her teammates better, and this kid needs to make her teammates better, and that kid needs to make her teammates better. The one thing that I can say as fact is Lily Bischoff makes her teammates better. And now that you have a kid like Gilliard, who, all due respect to Munster's roster last year, probably didn't have a bunch of kids that are making Gilliard better, now has a kid like Bischoff that's going to make her better, not to mention what Ava Grant does. I mean, and I looked it up because I didn't have the exact number earlier. Ava Grant did shoot 48% from the 3-point line. Okay. So that's a joke. Okay. And now you have Bischoff, Grant, Gilliard. And Gilliard told me casually through the summer too. She's like, you know, as we're in June workouts, she goes, when I'm on the floor, she goes, I feel like for the first time in high school basketball, I don't have to do everything. Like she's going to let the game come to her and make plays so Kevin's really already starting to get through to her. But she's got a good frame, and she's really physical and downhill kind of attacking, and particularly finishing at the rim and getting to the foul line, something that maybe Bischoff and Grant maybe don't do all that well. So I really like Center Grove this year. And I think if Kevin can get those pieces to fit together, which true as science, he's going to, they're going to figure into the mix again at Center Grove.
And then, I mean, Franklin Central too, those lurking right there. And we're going to see them go head to head right out of the gates on Tuesday as we record this. I think it's Tuesday is their season opener. So, I mean, you jump right into the incinerator. And I know, talking to both of them, both teams are very excited to start the game against a sectional rival like that.
Yeah, Duval's money. That kid's gonna be so good that she's gonna have a huge year. I love that she is, you know, you can't ask so much of these kids when they're 27s, but they just seem to really kind of bring her along very gradually. And having kids like Graves on that basketball team allowed her to really just get comfortable with her role. But I expect a really big year out of Peyton Duval this year. Ultra talented kid. And I think is going to be able to do some different things than what she showed last year. But yeah, Franklin Central's really, really good.
Flashes are looking to build off of their first season above 500, Danny, since 2019-20, and that was only their second since 2014-15. I know that they've had some really good teams. Like when I first moved here, they had some talent, but then it was just like injuries hit them hard. But this year, it's like everything's there. They have some depth. It feels like things are falling into place there for Vince Sorbonne, and it's looking up for them. Elsewhere in that sectional, as we just kind of wrap things up here, Mooresville is going to be young and inexperienced, but Ava Schaefer and Randy Granger are going to be kind of their centerpieces. Southport, Cassie McMasters is back following a year at Decatur Central, and they also had Riley Hamilton, who's a standout volleyball player. She quit for a couple years to focus on volleyball, and now she's back, so that's fun. She's a good kid. Then you also have Decatur Central, who's going to be young with only one returning starter, and then Perry Meridian, who has their second leading scorer back, and a few other key returners. So, you know, we'll see how Perry Meridian and Decatur Central are able to progress this year. Elsewhere in this state, the only other note that I had, Danny, Bloomington North, they graduated Mia Robin Holt and then Ava Rietmeyer, but they returned Ava Robin Holt. I'm sorry. She averaged over 11 a game, and they graduated Mia Robin Holt, who's playing college basketball somewhere. I had a chance to see them at Triton Central. They're big presences. So they'll have a piece there with the Robin Holt girl to build around, and then Martinsville. I'm high on the Arties this year. I think that they could cause some problems within their sectional. They added a transfer from Monrovia and Ruby Morrell. Dave Knuckles, it seems like they're building things right, and they had the weight room this offseason. They hit that hard, and they're a lot deeper than they were last year. So Artie seem to hopefully be trending up after a couple down years.
Yeah. It does figure to be, and I would say this as we kind of put a bow on things here. You know, if we didn't mention, you know, your school or your kid, I mean, we will throughout the year. I just looked up. We're at 2 hours right now. We just clogged. I mean, we haven't even seen any of these teams play basketball yet, and we're crowning champs and talking about matchups and sectionals and things like that. So we'll have an opportunity. We got big plans for the pod this year, and doing some live shows, and obviously you guys have all seen now that we didn't go through a conscious replacement of Josh, so we'll kind of rotate a fourth host in here at times and give us some perspective on things maybe locally or different perspectives if you guys are tired of hearing our takes. But I'm ready to go. I mean, it just even just talking about this for a couple of hours has me really excited to just watch some of these storylines unfold.
Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And then for those listening, you get a little taste of what I'm doing. Like next week, it's Center Grove, Franklin Central, McCutcheon, Plainfield, HSC, Lawrence North, and then a day off in state volleyball. And then, I mean, it's just full bore from there. I mean, this schedule sets up really nicely for some fun games early on. We're going to see a lot of best on best games, a lot of the things that, a lot of the teams, those dream matchups that you want to see, we're going to get to see in Lawrence Central and South Bend, Washington being chief among them. So it's going to be a really fun season. Like Danny mentioned, I think right now we're going him, Courtney, and I will rotate in some guest hosts, some guests too, like we did last year. It's a lot of fun. And it's nice too, Danny, I think, just to get the perspective of people from around the state, like Kyle Soakland from down in the Evansville area, who can help talk with us about Washington and some of those schools, and Victoria from up in Fort Wayne, who gets front row access, obviously, to Homestead, Columbia City, those teams. And we'll do some things like that, some different things. We'll have some different guests, hopefully some more player shows. I really enjoyed doing those over the summer as well. But yeah, and just keep an eye on the Twitters and on the page if you subscribe, because we'll be doing live shows, Danny, Courtney, and I, I'm sure, as things warrant. And I'll probably take a little bit of what Kyle does too, and just post interviews on here and share them on the show as well, instead of just going through Twitter and all that. So yeah, this is a good, healthy 2 hours and 5 minutes talking basketball. We did a good job staying on course. We didn't get anybody canceled. We didn't get ourselves canceled. And yeah, I'm feeling good about the start that we had.
Good. I am too.
Good. We thank you all so much for watching, and we will talk to you again maybe next week. Who knows? Thanks for watching.
Bye, guys.